So again, ladies and gentlemen, the final match of the day, Egypt, one of the titans here in the standings, standing at 6 points as compared to all the rest in this matchup against Ghana at 3 points. They severely need this win. And they also need to hope that Djibouti can actually win their best of
Yeah,
three as well against
yeah.
Tunisia. So there are certain conditions that need to be met if Ghana does want to accompany Egypt into the AEC.
And I think that's the thing is, Djibouti has struggled. Looking at the points for them, they don't have any. They've had a rough time, and for Tunisia, they've like I said, they've held their own, and they should be able to do a pretty good job against Djibouti. Unless again, Djibouti, we've seen teams like actually adjust on the fly from day one to day two. And so, for these women players, it is day two for them, and they could have learned a lot from yesterday. And who knows, if they'll be able to kind of adjust from that. But, the whole other thing too, with all of this, like you mentioned, it's been time for this to get to the point. I didn't know actually that MWI was in its third year. I was thinking it was actually like maybe the second year or so, but I know it's grown each and every time. And I mean, even the fact that you have these women's tournaments now offering even bigger prize pools, I feel like when I don't know if you've done this a tournament, but if you watch some of the like interviews for some of the women's MLBB teams for, around the world, I think a lot of them share somewhat of that sentiment where it's like they didn't know when it would happen where they have like a platform to compete on that's on a big level, that's on the same level of the men's teams. I mean, you might have some variances there and differences, but overall, I think it's just a scene as a whole in terms of like all esport games, all esport titles, that is still in basically you could say like it's still in its infancy, like it's still growing in comparison to these men's leagues, these men's tournaments and everything. So, more and more of these women players get an opportunity to show what they have, like skill wise and everything in all these games. And for MLBB, I think it's such a accessible game, and that's why you see it be a hit and all over the world here. So, but with that, we're going to jump into the draft here for this last match, this game between the two. It's Ghana and Egypt.
And it looks like in our first game of this best of three series, we will be seeing Egypt once again on blue side. Meanwhile, Ghana gonna be able to pick up into the red side. And I was actually quite surprised, right? Earlier on in our second match of the day, the ones that you guys were casting, these were very similar bands. It was a very similar drafting phase as something that you would see on a high competitive level, right? The Rogers being respected, Luo Yi, Chip, Fredrin as well. We did see some respect bands here and there with the Lolita, but other than that, it was very similar to what we've seen. So I want to see what goes down between these two, right? The Luo Yi already taken away, the Yuzong finally taken out from Velvet. Still sitting at 100% win rate, by the way, in this entire tournament. For Velvet herself, also at 100% win rate. It's a big respect ban, and I think that's the beauty of being on red side, right? You don't really have to conform to certain bans, but there is going to be still respect coming through.
Okay, I like that they did that, because this has been a hero that has caused havoc like in the entire African online qualifier. So it is taking out Akai as well. They might, I'm wondering if Ghana wants to actually go utility jungle, like Fred might still be open here. Okay, never mind, that's banned out. Good choice. Now this could also mean that Barrett's might be a priority. Because of the fact that you have Luo Yi taken out, it's either Chip or Barrett's. Nope, Barrett's is banned out too. This is great drafting from Ghana already. So good start here. So what does this leave for priority for Egypt that they want to take? I mean, there's still a lot left open. Matilda's going to be the pickup. What's the swing back here from Ghana?
Honestly, the Angela and the Boxy is still open, right? If they still want to play
Yeah.
into that utility jungle type of setup, they can definitely do that. Earlier on, we saw that Egypt were the ones to pick up the Angela and the Boxia, and we saw how well it was able to do with the rotations and the neutral objective control. So if Ghana want to pick up something similar and go for a similar kind of play style, that's still up in the air, but it looks like they're hovering over the Esmeralda, and it's a great flex, right? Because we've seen Esmeralda in different roles so far. Earlier on, it was on the jungle and it didn't exactly work out, but we've seen the Esmeralda find success in different roles, like the EXP lane. So it's already starting as a really good flex coming through for Ghana.
This is already. I actually really like what this first phase is looking like for Ghana right now. I mean, the Minoan Fury locked in, Esmeralda to deal with the shielding here from the Matilda. I'm just wondering what's going to go in the gold lane because from, again, what we saw in the previous matches and even in the interview, Names was on point a lot of times, and it was the Clint that she opted for. And it's looking like they're going to cover their bases really well. They get the Novaria once again and Terizla, and you have to keep in mind that with this new patch, I feel like Terizla is going to have a better time because we saw so many times before when Terizla was locked in, they go Bloodlust Axe first, but now since the Bloodlust Axe has been fused with the War Axe, you can just probably, we'll see if she does this, if she just goes with the War Axe right away, has that advantage, runs the Brave Smite, and is just a beast in the XP lane to deal with, right? So I'm liking what I'm seeing here, of course, from Egypt. I still want to know if it's going to be the Clint in the gold lane. Names had a hell of a game. If this is locked in here for Ghana, if the Leslie is the choice, there's a lot of obviously good damage potential. We'll have to see how the new items also kind of fit into this Leslie. But, you know, so far you're really going to want to just round the lineup better. I feel like especially in the mid lane, like what do you want to put in the mid lane against Novaria? Valentina is still open for now. Not sure if they want to go that route, but they are going to go ahead and focus on the gold lane options. I think they should still, with the carry, if they want to ban a gold lane, like take out the Clint, because Names had such good performances on the Clint so far.
And you know, technically, there are so many gold laners that do well against the Leslie in the early stage of the game, right? You mentioned the Clint earlier on, but heroes like the Claude, heroes like Moskov are heroes that should be able to have a good lane against the Leslie. Leslie does have really good damage, but it's not a constant DPS kind of source. It's very burst heavy, and it also requires a little bit of time to scale. So heroes like the Clint can punish the Leslie very, very well in the early stage of the game. So I was about to mention, you were talking about the mid lane. I said I was going to say that the Vexana was left open, but now full respect, right? Vexana and the Xavier have been eliminated. So maybe the Valentina could still come through here. If they want to focus on wave clear, they can go for the Lilia. We've seen it pop in a few times, especially for the women's scene. I think other than that, what would be a viable pick? Faramis is also an option if they want to play a little bit more into these team fights, but a Faramis against something like the Terizla is a little bit risky, and it looks like they are hovering over the Lilia right now.
If they lock this in, I think it's like Lilia so far hasn't had the best success rate. And I mean, it could change. Again, we have to always consider right now, currently, just the day of the patch, that itemization can be a little bit different, of course. And even the emblems, like I'm still waiting to see the new emblems utilized. I'm not sure when we're going to see that or if we do throughout these qualifiers. But right now that Lilia was locked in, and this could possibly be too. I know it flashed on the screen just a second. We'll be back to the draft in just a second. But that was a Fanny. I'm not sure if it was locked in, but it was shown. I think it was first the Martiz. Yeah, I saw Levi. I was like, huh? Yeah, it was Levi that popped up. It was Martiz and then a Fanny. So I'm not sure if that's going to be locked in. But if it is the case where it's an assassin jungle, this is interesting because you're going to be able to move around really quickly, do the things you need to do, and you just have to have the support that you need if it's an assassin jungle. And that's great because they already have a Matilda. right? The Matilda was locked in. That's a solid choice. You have a Novaria, so if it is, okay, it wasn't. It was the Levi, you know, so he goes with the Martiz, but that's still the Clint. So that's there, and you have great vision, but Eternal also, look at this on the other side. Amon is locked in here. We saw the Amon wreak havoc in the men's games, so we'll see if that can be replicated here by Lorelor.
Wow, I haven't seen an Amon in the competitive scene for so long. I think there was like 2 patches ago, I think there was like a change with Amon, a little bit of a buff towards Amon, but even since then we haven't seen this hero being picked up. So I personally am super stoked to see how this works out. And like you mentioned, Amon as an assassin against a Martis in the jungle. What do you think? What do you feel about this? Who do you think has a better time in the early stage of the game? Are there differences in their focus? Is Martis going to be more focused on objectives, or do you think Amon is going for a similar route too?
I think part of the job is like early game, you can feel it out. Do you have the support to be able to kill the Martiz? You know that, you know, he, especially like the hard part is Martiz, once you get the Decimate available at level 4, which is pretty early, and somehow, some way you get an early advantage on the Martiz, it gets pretty much very scary because he can snowball really hard. Like, that's the hero, that's the way it works. And, you know, for this case with an Amon, like we saw in the men's matches, you have to kind of switch your game plan throughout the course of the game. Like, different segments of the game, you're going to want to be doing different things on this Amon. So we'll see if Lorelor can do it.
So let's get it, ladies and gentlemen. Game number 1 in this best of 3 series. One of the matches that will decide Ghana and Tunisia's fate into the AEC for that final slot to make it to Casablanca. And with that, we'll dive into game number 1. Okay, so Amon,
there it is,
very aggressive with that emblem, as it looks like already.
Nucci might, oh, okay. I was gonna say, she flickered out, but you know, real quick, I wanted to point out too the fact that we're actually seeing it. The new emblem, it's coming out from Tashir Rocks. That is the Temporal Rain emblem that she's rolling with. And so, you know, this is basically, it helps with cooldown reduction for your non-ultimate abilities. So once you use your ultimate, it reduces the cooldown of your other abilities. So that's interesting, especially when you're using it on a Minotaur here.
Yeah, because usually we see the concussive blast to kind of help in the wave clear for the mid laners and for the other lanes. But wait a second, Nucci very aggressive onto the Leslie right now.
Oh, they can't get the kill though, so unfortunate for them, but they're gonna go in it with anyway. Nucci gonna be the one to fall, and now in the bottom lane, the flicker forward. Not sure if Names will be able to escape. So far she does. Yui here to back him up. Lorelor will fall. So unfortunate for Lorelor. They do get a kill though. It's on Nucci, but this is the jungler going down of Ghana, so it's a 1-for-1.
That was a big outplay as well, right? Again, the Names in that gold lane gonna be able to juke out these engages coming through from whichever or whatever or whoever the opponent is. But the kill wasn't for Names. It was actually picked up in by the Novaria. But neutral objective take.
Okay, penalty zone gonna be used. Electa already gets the turtle. So good penalty zone to zone the members of Ghana out. And it looks like Vendetta is gonna have to run under the turret. She should be fine. But Egypt, once again, will go ahead and get the objective. Nothing too crazy though here, Eternal. I mean, gold-wise, it's relatively even. You know, Ghana's still doing a pretty good job at keeping things together. It's just really, what's the timing here? You know, timing-wise for Ghana with the heroes that they have, there's a lot of early damage potential, especially when we talk about the Amon. And we know how Leslie builds up pretty quickly, but it looks like there might be a play here on the bottom side. Yui's going to be in trouble. Endless Shards not going to be used. There it is. Now it's online. They get the kill on Yui. And they might have to be forced to back off here. Once again, Ghana finding a good pick. Looks like they'll back off. They're going to be happy with the 1 kill.
So we're already seeing a kind of a difference in their playstyle, right? Egypt, they're looking for a little bit more objectives. They're more objective heavy with the utilization of the Martis. We saw that Electa didn't have a problem as well in the early stage of the game to pick up that first turtle of the game, right? Absolutely no contest. And Ghana a little bit more focused on these kills, a little bit more focused on the neutral. Wait a second.
Oh, Lorlor gonna be in trouble, gets wretched. There's the Decimate too. And that's the combination we were talking about with this Martis. Now Electa makes her way under the turret, gets the flicker out. They're still going to battle it out for a little bit longer. Into the backside they go. Still, the damage potential is there. Astral Echo going to be dropped. Might get the shot. Going to poke him down. Electa gets another kill on the board on the Martis. And now left to its own devices, Sapphire's in trouble, has to pop the Black Shoes. Waiting for the team to get here in time. One hit away. Will be able to get away for now, but the turret going to be worked on. The ultimate's going to be dropped, forced back a little bit longer. Yui there to help keep them at bay. Lorlor might look for a kill. Has the endless shards, but is going to take her time not to press it any further. Gets poked down, but that looks like it's going to be it for now. The turtle is up as both teams want to go ahead and get in position.
I was about to say, right? I was about to say that Ghana were more focused and more focus centralizing on the kills, but it looks like Egypt found an opportunity to take it for themselves as well. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, as this neutral objective spawns, Electa is 2 levels ahead. Let's see the take coming in from Lorlor, if they're going to be able to contest at all, rather.
Yeah, Vendetta able to get Yui with the falling star moon, but the turtle, who does it go to? Electa grabs it. Now they're going to go for the fight. Endless shards going to be used. Teshir rocks goes down. Vendetta still on the backside, forcing Velvet back a little bit further. Has the shields that she needs, but she's going to get forced back herself. Waiting for any support here from Sapphire, and she'll be just fine. Able to withstand. Jumps back in with the falling star moon. Might have been a mistake as Vendetta goes down on the top side.
That should have been a 1-for-1 trade. Well, technically a 2-for-1 trade with the neutral objective taken in by Egypt. But that re-engage coming in from Vendetta with the falling star moon gave it over. Oh, wait a second. That's another pick over for Egypt. And now they're picking things left and right. The scraps given over by Ghana. Earlier on, Names was able to get a turret in the bottom side, and now they're going to be able to pick up a turret in the top side as well. But look at the mid side.
Oh, Lord, trying to get those endless shards off, but it won't be enough damage to pick up the kill. Still have to be careful about the damage potential from Lorlor. She's able to do quite a bit. They're still working on this mid turret. Not sure if they'll be able to get it just yet. Velvet also making her way there. And so right now you find yourselves Ghana just making some mistakes that don't need to be made. You know, I mean, a lot of times it looks like they could just be happy with the trade that they get, but they continue to press on when they don't necessarily need to. And then they get punished, and that's why now you're looking at nearly a 4,000 gold lead for Egypt as they look to set their sights on these turrets now.
Yeah, and with that gold lead, we see that Novaria already picking up the enchanted talisman. The fact that she's been able to spam out her abilities, go in for the pokes before Ghana goes in for these setups, for the skirmishes or even the team fights, has been a big problem, right? That burst coming through, that nearly hit onto a Korfa there on the Leslie would have been a problem, would have actually forced her into a recall. And there you go, Names again with the endless battle, one of the next core items that a Clint already has. You talked about the gold lane earlier on in the drafting phase, the fact that they should try and go and respect it for Clint. And again, we're seeing the prowess that Names has on the Clint already with the core items. And now she's going to be able to contribute a lot more damage in this team fight and this neutral objective take that Ghana completely gave over for Egypt to take.
Yeah, I just don't think, at this point there was much that Ghana could do. Better if they just kind of tried to defend, but a huge penalty zone again from Velvet, able to find the set. Multiple members going to fall here. They're going to go ahead and trade it out. Velvet finally falls 2 down, though, for Ghana. Again, a massive set from Velvet. She's been doing this all night long this time around on the Turizla. But they're going to be happy with what they get. They get that tier 1 turret down and a couple more, plus the resources. And they get themselves a little further ahead now for Ghana. They got to do something at this point in the game. You're looking at a minute and some seconds here for this Lord, and you're wondering if Ghana has the firepower to fight back. Electa once again fighting under the turret. Okafora in trouble. Nowhere to go, gets caught down under the turret, and now Lore is going to be next. Gets decimated. Turret at the tier 2 in the bottom lane will fall for Ghana. And now Egypt looking for possibly more. They get the shields down on the turrets this early on. That's the best they can do. Still making plays in the mid lane, keeping Vendetta in the mid. Keeping them at bay here. Also, Velvet walking that wave up top. Still making it work, and we're 30 seconds away from the Lord here.
This is a big problem for Ghana. It's a big problem if they want to make it to the AEC in Casablanca, Morocco, because, ladies and gentlemen, this is complete control over for Egypt. And you were asking about timeline for Ghana, and I'm also wondering what it is, right? Are they just supposed to kind of wait into the late game, wait for Akorfa to get into those core items? But even then, they don't have the proper setup. As look at this.
Huge circling eagle. 4 man's endless shards not going to be enough. Ultimate Snake going to be used as well. But man, what is Egypt on right now? Again, time and time again, showing the prowess here. Velvet keeping some of the members of Ghana at bay alone. And it's so tough to see here for Ghana as they were holding together in majority of the early game. But right now it's slipping through their hands. Turret's going to be worked on the tier 2. Nucci might still want more. Circling you once again. Gets the flicker out from Okafora. And now Velvet. Ultimate Snipe dropped once again, but there's plenty of bodies to block it out. That's going to be a flicker though. Used from Yui, and now Lord is up. Do they want to go for it? Vendetta going to spot out Velvet. And they actually want to contest this turtle, or this Lord here, Eterna.
This is going to be so difficult, right? Because granted, not just because of the gold gap, but Electa, she's 3 levels ahead of the Amon. So even if they want to go for a 50-50 on the Retribution battle, it's not going to favor them at all. I'm wondering how they're going to go in for the engage, because technically they don't have the proper tools, but look at this!
Velvet once again, a huge penalty zone, gonna lock down 2. Tashir is gonna fall, Lore as well. Vendetta trying to do her best, keeping the front at bay, but she gets whittled down. Luckily for her, Sapphire was there to help her out. Now Okafora, does she have enough damage in this Leslie? But it looks like they just have to give it up. Down their crucial members, and that's gonna be the objective now, secured and locked in for Egypt as they get ready to walk it in, especially this mid lane, the focus.
I mean, technically, Akorfa is doing damage, but like you mentioned, right? I don't think it's enough just yet. I think one of the items that she's picked up already was just the endless battle. I'm not really sure how far she is in terms of items as well, but with how much damage and the timing that is required for her to go for it, it's going to be a lot difficult. And there you go, right? Her first item was actually a sea halberd. So sure, there's damage into it. It's highly respecting, of course, the regeneration coming in from Egypt, but it's not one of her core items. She's gonna need a little bit more time. They've sacrificed it for utility, but look at that damage coming through.
Look at the damage from Names. Just a couple shots, but no Inferior going to be used with the flicker. Trying to keep them here on this part of the base, but Velvet jumps in once again, going to find Okafora. And Okafora is down. And this is troublesome. They lose a ton of damage. Lord's going to be working on the crystal, and Egypt looking to end the game here, and they'll do just that as Egypt takes game 1 against Ghana.
12 minutes. 12 minutes, Naisu. That felt like a really big snowball coming in from Egypt. Yeah. What a way to start this best of 3 series. And I was wondering, right? I mean, Egypt, they've been playing the entire day. I was wondering if they were going through, if they would go through a little bit of, lethargy coming through, the endurance. But man, they're serious about this, right? And they are going to be able to lead this best of 3 series against Ghana. And I think we got some information from the producer earlier on. Nice. Was that Tunisia winning that first game
Tunisia won the first game.
Well, there you go.
That's tough for Ghana, Eterna. Because I'm pretty sure they, best case scenario for Ghana at this point, I'm thinking, if I'm thinking correctly here, is they need to win the next 2 games, and Tunisia needs to lose. Because then that would give Ghana 5 points, and Tunisia would have 4. That's what I'm thinking. So we'll see what happens. But Ghana, based off game number 1, like let's focus on like what happened just here. Early game was okay. They were making plays, and I even like we talked about earlier. I liked what they did in the draft there. The concept was that they really wanted to utilize the fact that they have an Amon to go against, this lineup that Egypt brought to the table. They wanted to assassinate, members early on. That's why you pick the Amon, and then you transition later on to kind of use it to just burst the best you can, and then hopefully your Leslie can follow up. You have a Minotaur that should be able to set things up for you, and we saw a couple of good sets and Minoan Fury combinations with the Flicker, but unfortunately, it's the same story for Egypt, Eternal. Like every single time that they have, let's say, met a pretty good match in the early game, they just take off at some point in the mid game. It's usually after they get, maybe it's the second turtle, maybe it's a third, or, they win a key skirmish or something like that. And then Egypt just takes off. And I think a big part of that success rate or what allows them to do that is the fact that so far, too, they have really been loving that Novaria pick. And the fact that they always have the Echo available to them, provides the vision that they need, and, increases the hitboxes too. Like that's a whole thing. It's like the Novaria alone is such a great hero. And it was something that we always saw all the time, and then it fell off a little bit, but it still gets picked up. And the purpose of it works out so well, especially when we're talking about a Novaria Matilda combination. Like that's just, I don't know, that's just like unreal levels of utility that brings to a team. And we saw it. We saw that happening. I mean, and then not to mention Velvet. Like Velvet, how many times did she land a great penalty zone on multiple members? And this is funny because this is what she does. Like Velvet does this even, well, mostly it's been on Yuzhong. That was banned out. So then she just does pretty much the same thing on the Charizla. And it's funny too because I got my answer earlier when we got to look at the items. She didn't go War Axe. Like she just went Dominance Ice first. So she had that locked in, had the defensive items that she needed because her job, like she understood the job. Velvet was like, I'm just gonna jump in, do my thing, get that debuff up, and then if I die, I die. But I also can rely on the body of Smith, the passive of Terizla, to survive a little bit longer than expected. And this is also what just allowed, utilizing the Martis here, the way that the Decimate works and everything else, like we talked about. Like Electa was able to just have a hell of a time, like just a fun time, I would say, like on a Martis, because of the way that you utilize the utility you have, you utilize the fact that you have a Terizla that's just, in Velvet's hands, I guess you could say, and it's just it worked out. Egypt executed it really well, as they have for all the games we've seen them play.
Because like as a general whole, that's what we're seeing. But even the small decision making that they made, right? You were highlighting the Charizla, you were highlighting Velvet. The fact that she went in for that item first, right? The dominance ice first, is because
Yep.
she knows in her lane who she's going against with. Like she's not going to be too greedy with her build. She's not going and looking for too much damage, but she also knows that one of her main winning conditions is also to try and shut down the Esmeralda, because honestly, I would say that the Esmeralda is one of their only active tools for them to utilize in team fights, right? Because sure, Minotaur has the Minoan Fury, but it's a little bit more passive, it's a little bit more reactive as compared to something like the penalty zone that can really look in for these picks in these team fights. So they're trying to she knows that she needs to shut down the Esmeralda to take away the falling star moon possibilities in these particular team fights, because without any tools to set up. I mean, in
Mhm.
general, the composition that Ghana brought was very dependent on this fact, right? I mean, Lilia requires that proper setup. She doesn't have the CC in her kit to utilize in order for her to be able to maximize on her damage. She needs somebody to be able to lock them in place. And that wasn't there necessarily for Ghana earlier on. And it could be similar to what Amon needs, and even Leslie as well. So I understand the beauty of the draft for Ghana, but if I had to
Hmm.
compare in between the drafts with them and Egypt, I think Egypt kind of thought about it a little bit more with the winning conditions that is also required from their drafts, and they executed it so well. I don't know, Leslie in the gold lane. What do you think about that?
It's funny because I was literally just uh, looking Leslie up right now. And part of the reason why I'm doing that is because of just the way that, like, the build, I guess the build path is. I was trying to wonder, like, why the Sea Halbert first? I get that you have a Matilda over there. You know, I get that there's like some shielding and sustainability you want to work through, but like Sea Halbert first can work because you know this is Leslie we're talking about, but it's just like I don't know. There was not enough time. I can't remember. Second item was an endless battle. Like, did she pick up this endless battle second item?
I think so,
Uh,
yes.
like Leslie is. Don't get me wrong. I love playing Leslie too because of those big true damage numbers.
Yeah.
And I just think that in this case, maybe they assumed again, we don't know but what Ghana was planning here, but maybe they just assumed it was going to be names on the Clint, like we called out in the draft. We said, you know, Clint's open most likely. Remember, they banned out the carry and they banned out one other. Ghana banned out one other marksman, and it was all to basically maybe say like, okay, go ahead and pick up the Clint. And so the answer then was their Leslie, and I just like I'm thinking maybe it was a range to range thing. Like that's what they wanted. And then they just hope that, you know, at some point you really get to build up and have that true damage potential that Leslie's so known for and you're stacked. But again, I just feel like the timing wasn't there like with what their game plan was. And part of it too was the fact that they needed to play around the fact that they had an Amon. And so I think that was kind of the idea of like, let's let the Amon shine in the early game, buy enough time for this Leslie
Yeah.
to farm up and get to where, you know, she needs to be. But, you know, like I said, the answers were just there because how many times do we see an endless shards try to get a kill? So like you have to think about it, and this is the case usually for any assassin jungle. Like every single time that you are committing to get a kill, especially with an ultimate like endless shards the for this Amon, and you don't get it, like there's so much downtime in between waiting for that ultimate again. You know, so like, and then it's like, well, then we can just pay attention and shut down the gold lane, and that's what Egypt did. So I think, again, if you want to go Leslie, especially into a Clint from Names, who has had a phenomenal performance on this hero alone, you have to really be able to like farm up, and all that means is extend the game. So that just means also most likely pick up a utility type jungler to you know make it as long as you can, like extend the game as long as you can, because Amon's not going to be able to do that for you, especially against a Martiz who is, you know, it's weird. Like Martiz is such a weird hero because he can actually go toe to toe with utility junglers. Like if the Barretts and the Fredrin weren't banned out and those were picked up, Martiz is a completely like he's an okay choice. But what's weird about him is the fact that you can actually turn him into an assassin himself. Like the way you played in the early game, and we saw this from Electa, and get decimates after decimate after decimate, and get these kills, get these stacks going. It's weird to like just be an Amon, and like then it gets to a point where like, and I'm not sure 100% on her build. We'll have to take a look at this later when we eventually get to the highlights. But the Martiz build can usually even go to the side of tankiness a little bit, you know, and that's why again you really didn't get to utilize the Leslie pick because of just the timing of the game as a whole. And so I think if you're going to do that, if you're going to kind of readjust here for Ghana, I think they need to lock down their gold lane a little bit better. Like I always say this, Eterna, I always say, give them the gold lane experience. And that's what they need. Like by gold lane experience, that just means like, and we see this in our metas, both of ours, you know, in Philippines and Indonesia, where it's like you go and farm your heart out, and we will take care of the rest of the
Your
game. And then
mind's
later
off.
on, yeah, and then your mind's off, and then later on, you go and you shine as a gold laner, right? So I think that's the biggest thing is like have that gold lane experience, and that's kind of what needs to happen here for as they get readjusted for game number 2.
I think the story about the Leslie is a little bit similar to the story about Hanabi, right?
Yeah,
Sure, there are certain scenarios where these kinds of heroes can work, but as a general rule of thumb, these kinds of heroes, they need so much time to scale to that
yeah,
late game that we don't necessarily have time to get, right? Because it's always ended in so early of the minutes, right? I think the longest game we've had so far is 16 minutes, and that was a one off. The average has always been 10, 12 minutes. Our first match for this best of three series, also 12 minutes. So
hmm
that's not nearly as enough time for these kinds of heroes to get to that item power spike, unless, of course, it's a full rampage, full snowball. Something we saw from the Hanabi, I think, by Egypt themselves. No, actually, it was by Namibia. Yeah,
hmm
Namibia in match number 1 where they were able to make this Hanabi work. So I agree with you, right? You were talking about timing. I completely agree with you. Just to underline that as well. And I'm wondering whether or not they're gonna start respecting this Clint. Because so far nobody has been able to
yeah.
go toe to toe in the gold lane against this Clint. I don't know how this Clint works because when I think about lane bully, I'm thinking about heroes like Moskov, like Harith, but with the Clint coming into the fray, if you utilize something like the Moskov, a hero that we've seen become very prioritized in the gold lane, do they go head to head, or does Clint do better in the lane, or does Moskov do better in the lane?
That's a good question. Like currently, right now, I think the Mozkov would actually like early game. I don't think Mozkov would do very well. Like you're just clearing the waves because like
Right.
Clint, especially like if okay, then we consider like level 4. Once you get that the grenade bombardment, like Clint's gonna face value. He's gonna out damage the Mozkov unless the Mozkov I feel like is able to get the stun off or able to just utilize the fact that you get those resets and everything with the second skill. So it's just like I think Clint still wins, especially depending on how you build the Clint. And the overall raw damage, I would say, is better in the 1v1 versus Moskov. Now, again, Moskov can get around with his Spear of Destruction and do all his things, and if he's able to get the stuns off and then just unleash, then yeah, that's great. But I don't know. They need something to deal with the Clint, and maybe that's just a ban. As we jump in here into the draft for game 2. Maybe we see them ban it. Maybe we see them take it. But there's a lot here. I think they should. I think they should also think about taking or banning out the Novaria. I feel like Novaria has been a problem. But they go the Yuzhong, the Akai, Louis Yi's taken out here. Maybe the Chip is next, and of course Frederick and Barrett's like we saw in the previous game.
Well, right now they've both swapped sides, right? Coming to the
Yep.
drafts here in game number 2. So with Ghana on the blue side, they could very well be either taking away the Clint or the Novaria, right? Put Egypt in position where they have to kind of prioritize what they want to go in for the bans, pick your poison kind of scenario. Because again, with Ghana on blue side, they also have first pick. So they do have priority in that regard. What do you think? Do you think that's something that they could do? Because again, right, other than Novaria, I think the Clint, again, has been such a problem. Give names, put names on a different type of hero because she's been popping off. But the Roger does get banned out now for Egypt. And Novaria
Oh,
gets
there it
banned
is.
out. You mentioned it earlier on, Naisu. But that does mean that the Clint once again is left open for them to take.
Okay. I want to see what this last ban is going to be because there's so much open here at Turner. Like if this is not the Chip, I just feel like Chip is not the flavor like for any of the African teams, whether it's men or the women. They just don't really want to play around with the Chip here and the kind of the way he shakes the games up. I feel like so. If this isn't Chip, I'm wondering, yeah, what do they want to ban out for this next one? Because with a lot left on the table, you're talking still the factor. It's Fredrin. Barrett's is available. I'm just wondering, maybe does Lorelor want to take the Barrett's, have that utility, like I was saying, because this is the thing, like, get a utility jungler this time around, give Akorfa the time she needs to build up on whatever gold lane she's going to pick, because she could find herself just going against the Clint again, you know, from names here. So let's see what the game plan is going to be, because even a Harith is open. You could technically throw the Harith in the gold lane. I know we don't see that all the time, but it's a possibility. But they will take an Angela, who again has been a reoccurring pick when it's left open. This is what I want to see. If this is locked in, I want to see the Malefic gun. I want to see how this works on, because as soon as they said increases the range, I feel like everybody would automatically think of Layla. Like, this is a great item, Malefic gun, give it to Layla. She's already got long range attacks. Why not increase it by 15%? But it's not going to be. They go to Matilda Baksha.
Yeah. I was about to say, because you were talking about the Barretts and you were talking about these utility junglers, and I was like, why not just pick up the Angela first, right? And then you can kind of flex in what your junglers should be. If the enemy picks up the Barretts, you can pick up the Baxia. If they pick up the Baxia, then you can pick up something like the Barretts. But it looks like they're not even eyeing the Barretts at all. Gonna have a completely different playstyle in mind, and they're gonna be able to deny the Terizla away. They actually go for Sun. So I think you mentioned that you've seen the Sun here in the African qualifiers. What sense are you getting here from the Sun? Is it a little bit more utility? What's going on here?
I'm trying to remember. I think we saw a Sun pop up maybe once in the men's.
Okay.
And it didn't, if I remember, it didn't work out too well. I think, was it place? I think it was place in the XP lane too. But this time around, if it's jungle, if this is actually a jungle Sun, I've played jungle Sun myself and I actually enjoy it. It's decent, but against a Baksha with a Matilda, like this very meta, you know, like combination, I don't think it's gonna be fun. I think even if you, I think you could go as far as saying that if there was any invading going on, or like just stealing your camps, or even just putting pressure on the camps, like just with Nucci alone on the Matilda, jungle Sun is not going to be fun. Interesting. Oh, they banned out the Barretts. They banned out the Barretts, and why is that? Is that just because they don't want to go against Barretts in the XP lane? Because the Baksha is already locked in here. That's interesting.
We've actually seen the Barretts in the EXP earlier on by Tunisia, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe, exactly, maybe that's what they're anticipating. They don't want to put the Terizla in that lane, but honestly, one of the greatest counters towards the Terizla in that lane would be the Xborg, right? So
yeah, Xborg.
Usually we see an Xborg being banned out, but it's actually the Barretts and the Esmeralda. So maybe they know something that we don't, right? Maybe Velvet enjoys utilizing these kinds of heroes. And by the way, these are 3 respect bans towards Velvet. The Yuzong, you have the Barretts, as well as the Esmeralda, if that's true. But it looks like the Natan has been locked in against the Brody, Naisu.
Okay. All right, I was waiting. I've been waiting for either Vexana or Aurora to pop up. I'm so interested in all the mid lane heroes right now at Turner because of the new changes with the items and the way that, you know, that kind of changes the dynamic. Like even Clock of Destiny, you don't need time to build up anymore. It scales. Oh, and perfect hero to talk about that with. Sicilian, who does scale up, you know, based on how many hits he gets, of course, and was one of the heroes that really likes that Clock of Destiny. Well, now we're going to see if Sicilian actually still goes for that first build Clock of Destiny, given the fact that, yeah, you just get those, you just get the full stacks, I believe it is, with the new iteration of Clock of Destiny. So if this is an R-Lot locked in, seems to be this case. It's going in the XP lane versus the Terizla. That's going to be a huge 1v1 battle between them. And interesting, because if you look at the lineup here, once again from Egypt, this is a very solid lineup. Nathan, especially late game, is scary.
For sure, but how would you compare the Natan to a Sicilian in the late game, right?
Oh.
Unlimited stacks for the Sicilian, that damage is just going to keep on scaling indefinitely. So if we're talking about late game, honestly, both of these teams have something to offer, and there's an argument to be made about Ghana in the later stage of the game. And I think there was a moment that we saw a Sicilian in a tournament. Was it MPL ID playoffs? I'm not really sure, but I think I
I think
mentioned my
so, yeah.
distaste about Sicilian. I was like, I don't really like the Sicilian in this current meta because of how fast paced these games are going. The Sicilian needs a little bit more time to scale and to deal out the damage. But I stand corrected, right, with the Sicilian back then. The Sicilian in certain scenarios, well, depending on the pilot, obviously, can have
Yeah.
a lot of damage in the early game and not have too many issues with mana as well, depending, of course, on the emblems that have been utilized. But ladies and gentlemen, here it is, match point in this best of 3. Ghana want to try their best to force a game number 3 under Egypt if they still want to make it to the AEC in Morocco, in Casablanca. And here we go into the land of dawn for game number 2.
Man, I was hoping, Eterna, as we were talking about the Sicilian pick, I was just kind of thinking in my mind, like, Sicilian would also be a good hero to take one of the new emblems, the Temporal Rain. Because the Temporal Rain, like, once you use the Bat's Feast, it reduces the cooldown of your other abilities, and that would be perfect for getting, you know, the claw off, and of course, you know, the bat wings here, and building up the stacks, of course, and just kind of playing around with it. It would have been great to see, but you know, in pure rage works too. You want to get that mana, of course, but that's still what I'm wondering about with the Sicilian is the build path. Like, I'm still expecting Clock of Destiny to be picked up or at least rushed, but and then from there kind of scaling up, because again, remember, even the new glowing wand works really well now because of you don't have to build the Necklace of Durance anymore. And we know, even having Nucci here with this Matilda and the Quantum Charge, that glowing wand will actually really help out with this. So interesting to see if the Sicilian's going to be work out here. Also does pick up the mana boot, so has that available right now. It's really just up to Ghana, I feel like, to set the pace, to get things going. And part of that too is the fact that there was a role swap, and this happened quite a bit through Africa qualifiers here at Turner, where most of the players were able to switch roles. And so yeah, it is Lore on the gold lane this time around, with a Korfa on that sun in the jungle.
Already a roster swap coming through, ladies and gentlemen. So keep your eyes peeled at what we're going to be expecting later on. But I think for the early game, mid-trio... Oh, wait a second.
Velvet might get caught out a little bit. It actually goes in with the final slash. Kafora gonna have to fight around. Looks like Turtle's gonna be secured by Electa, but penalty zone goes in as well. No one falling just yet. Flicker over the wall will keep Vendetta alive, but Egypt will go ahead and get the objective. So still, both teams kind of feeling out the situation here.
Yeah, what I was about to say before that is Egypt, they have the mid-trio prio, right? They have the better wave clear, they have the Matilda, they have the Baxia, and they also have the Lilia, as compared to, the Sicilian, who clears a lot slower and is a little bit more mana dependent as compared to the Lilia. So we're kind of seeing that come to play. Faster rotations went in, and they were able to set up for the neutral objective take a lot quicker as well. And it turns out, though, in the early stage of the game, despite Egypt holding on to that lead, the Sun, right? A Korfa on the Sun still has been able to level out in the playing field, really standing very equal in that EXP against Electa on the Baxia, both at level 6. So this still can swing both ways, depending on how these teams utilize that mid-trio setup, because it looks like Egypt's going to be looking for more here. Very, very active Matilda, and here comes Electa.
Oh, Electa. It's a flicker out, plus the Heart Guard's going to be there as well. They're going to fight under the turret. For now, still going to be alive. Nice first blood from Lorelor, able to get it with a torn apart memory. And now they're going to fire back at Electa, but she's so tanky. We'll see if they just back off from here. But meanwhile, there's still a fight now in the mid lane. A final slash going to be used. Korfa has to get out, using the clones here, of course. Still going to bait him out. And now she backs off a little bit further, but that first blood for Ghana. But it'll be Egypt that gets the objective.
Yeah, it's going to be a kill over to Lorelor though, right? A Brody in the early stage of the game. What they want to do is to get that snowball in real quick, but is that a rose gold meteor being built in early on for Lorelor? That's a defensive item. That's a very unique build pattern. Perhaps respecting the engage potential, the kill pressure potential coming in from Egypt, but that will reduce her damage by quite a bit.
Okay. Again, these builds are going to be interesting to see which way they go with them, but right now it looks like Ghana is just going to give up the objectives. Hurdle secured here once again. Egypt furthering the lead. It looks like they're going to go up top now. Eyes set up here on the defending this tier 1, but they're going to be pushed in. Sapphire taken out so quickly. Electa there to help them out, cutting them off even further. Forfa by herself. She should be fine though, utilizing the clone. And now Egypt will go ahead and face towards this mid lane. Keep an eye on Velvet. Once that final slash is going to be available, she has the flicker. She could force a fight as well. And right now, Lorelor goes off, not able to get the kill with a torn apart memory. Not enough marks or damage.
That was really close though, but Lorelor.
That's what I was saying. The final slash going to be used. But all this to just push Lorelor back. Gets the flicker out too. Turret is all Egypt wanted. They know the macro game. They get the objective.
Looks like Corrosion Scythe built in for the Sun. Gonna be able to utilize that basic attack, but Circling Eagle just to go in for the zone at the moment, as it looks like they want to push in the tempo here in the bottom side of the map. And remember, Names has been left untouched, and that's a Starlium Scythe already built in. You don't want that Natan to snowball.
Oh, look at the damage. Vendetta goes in with the penalty zone, actually gets a kill out of the exchange. Still surviving for a little bit longer, but will eventually go down. At least a Vendetta got something out of that. Clearly outnumbered and outgunned. But right now, still going to be working on that bottom lane, trading things across the map for now. That turret will finally go down to the bottom lane, the tier 1, and it looks like Egypt will make their way back to the mid lane, possibly looking for Sapphire. Look how fast Electa is able to move around the map, and it looks like she just forced her back. Turtle's coming up, though, in just a second here. So, Ghana, are they actually able to go and dance off for the turtle? Do they just give it up here?
That's a big question, but in terms of that Retribution EXP, both Korfa as well as Electa are at level 9, so they want to go for the 50-50. It should be possible, but they don't want to risk it. They want to stay disciplined here. They're just going to give it up and, you know, try to buy some more time for, of course, the Sicilian to get into that power spike, get in those stacks as quickly as possible to dishing out that damage, because I think that's what they're hanging, and that's what hangs in the balance right now. But look at that damage output from just the Matilda alone, by the way, as Egypt going in for more, looking in for that siege as that tower in the top side goes down.
Yeah, it's Velvet could be in trouble. Velvet finally going down. Lorelor here still. This Lorelor might be the saving grace for some of this game to transition a little bit better. Gonna be chased down. It looks like Names is making her way down as well. They might cut in, goes in with Entropy, has to go in. There's the Heart Guard. Is it enough though to keep him alive? Lorelor is gonna fall. She's down, and now they're gonna fight it out a little bit longer. Tashio Rocks gets the brunt of the damage as it's a double for Names. And Egypt once again dominating this side of the map, taking what they can, battling it out for the resources as well. And still trying to go in for more. They get the clone out, but still they're 40 seconds away from the Lord. So Egypt will continue to take the turrets if they can. It looks like they're going to keep putting the pressure here. Not much Vendetta can do all by herself.
very aggressive, right? And they're still trying to keep to their tempo. They're still digging in with their claws at full strength over on to Ghana. They're putting out some damage onto Lorlor, but they do have to respect the Brody. Right? I think you mentioned the Brody. She was sitting at a 2-0 earlier on. She did get shut down earlier on before, but she does have her first core item to be able to deal that damage and siege in those turrets. But very aggressive. She's actually opting to go in for the clear. Akorfa also goes in for the invade. And they don't know. Egypt, they have absolutely no clue. They're picking up scraps over from Egypt slowly but surely to keep their eye on the game.
It's the best. I mean, at this point, Eterna, Ghana really has to kind of just be very cautious in the way they approach some of these, even parts of their jungle, right? Because they're going to have to give up objective after objective. It doesn't seem like they really want to be in the position to fight for the objectives, or what we call, you know, these objective dances. There is no dances. It seems like they might possibly just want to go for split pushes and get what they can across the map. But even with that, they're going to get spotted out. Korfa has to go back. Looks like Velvet's going to try to stop it in the tracks. Goes in with the final slash. There's the heart guard. Now Velvet on the run. That is the damage from the sun we were talking about before. And even under the turret, they're going to chase Velvet. They get the flicker out. Here comes Electa, now might want to fight back. They know the heart guard's not there anymore. And meanwhile, on the bottom side, Vendetta will get taken down by Names. 4-0-1, we know exactly what happens. One Nathan gets the damage that this hero needs, and it's exactly where she's at right now. Egypt now looking to take the resources and march in with the Lord in the mid.
I think before that entire dance, Names was able to get that Holy Crystal, so that damage is there, and she is already at a power spike. But look at that damage coming through.
Once again, shield's going to be popped. Lord's still going to be up for now. Ghana has to make work of it, but Egypt, could they end the game here? Divine Glaive also being picked up. Circling Eel goes in, fighting under the turret. They're just going to battle it out. Heart Guard going to be used. Electa could be in trouble. Has the Revenge Strike, but Vendetta going to be the one to go down. Lord's still going to be up here. Egypt, is this the end for them? Working on the base, it's a monster kill for Names. She does it again, and Egypt will sweep the series, taking out Ghana here in their hopes to lock in that slot.
Clean entirety for Egypt, right? I just want to like scroll through real quick of all the games that Egypt has played, and it's a clean match. They have not dropped a single game throughout the entirety of this African regional qualifiers to get into AEC. And it's been insane. Like, what? What is this team made of?
Sheesh. I don't know. I actually don't know, Eternal. Like, this is, like, Egypt, I'll say this. They are 100% impressive, and I think they are ready to go. Like, I mean, they still got to get to the they still got to do AEC, but like, I feel like this team is competitive at an international level. Like, so far from what we've seen from Egypt, I think that eventually, I'm just gonna say let's say we're one of the teams that secures through AEC. So far from what we've seen in these past couple days, these guys are competitive on an international level, you know. Tunisia, so we got word too. Tunisia won 2-0. So I'm pretty sure, we'll get the final confirmation for that, but I'm pretty sure that means that it is Egypt and Tunisia that will be those two slots from Northern Africa that lock in those slots to AEC. Very dominant showing here. Egypt, we saw this even before. With the men's group, like they had the same points. I think they did have 6 points as well, but again, great performance here.
Completely. And now we're going to take a look at the highlights from game number 1 in this best of 3 series between Egypt as well as Ghana. And for game number 1, right, it felt like you mentioned, right, Naisu, there was a saving grace for Ghana, right? They were utilizing the kill pressure with the Amon. They were utilizing this Amon pick to get in more trades. Sure, they lost in those objectives, but they were able to get these trade kills in to kind of level it out in the gold lead and the gold difference between themselves and Egypt. But eventually, Egypt understood that they kind of needed to buy a little bit more time until they were able to get those power spikes from coming through. And when it hit, Egypt pulled in the trigger and they were able to get kills and have the kill pressure themselves. It started here in the bottom lane, as you guys can see right now. The fact that they were able to kind of duke it out, and as well as trigger in the black shoes, push in some damage, get in more trades and kills, and eventually kind of equalize that over and collapse it over to the neutral objectives, just really paved the way for this Maritis to scale and to snowball from this 5th minute of the game.
And, as you watch through this, like I said, Ghana actually did some pretty good things like throughout the series. It's just unfortunate that, again, they were up against the, arguably the best group to deal with throughout the women's here for Africa online qualifiers. And it was apparent that, in some instances they had the right ideas. I even liked, the role swap that they did in game 2, but with this, as you see, like Egypt, just the way that they kind of play around the compositions that they have, the set potential, whether that was Velvet, like a lot of times, again, Velvet's insane. Whatever hero she's deciding to play, whether it's the Yuzhong, whether it's the Terizla, she seems to always really find those good multiple hero sets, and I think that's really what kind of plays a big part in their team fighting power, for this team from Egypt. And even as you watch this kind of unfold, like they do have just great responses to dealing with, the way that the enemy teams try to counter pick or, pull things off here. And, their names time and time again, I don't know, I feel like they have to do something about names on this Clint, or even before, like the way she performs in the gold lane is definitely very competitive, and I feel like that's something that most of the teams that do play against Egypt kind of struggle with here, is kind of locking down a winning matchup in the gold lane, and then of course also dealing with the fact that Velvet for some reason just is a setting master. Like she's everywhere, and you'll see it here even unfold in game 2.
Yeah, even though her heroes were kind of respected away from her again on the Terizla, on the Arlet, she was able to make a lot of plays happen. And I was thinking about the Terizla earlier on because I wanted to say, like, despite Egypt being able to win this in a 2-0, and despite that small mistake that we saw from Vendetta in game number 1 on the Esmeralda in the top side when she went in for the re-engage with the Falling Star Moon, there were several moments like this. This is the one that we see on screen where she was able to kind of prolong this, buy a lot of time, and actually extend the series as long as it could have been. And she was able to keep that composure, right? From the first game to the second game, when she transitioned on the Terizla, it felt like the potential was a lot more seen and more viable for us to see. And it's great, right? Despite Ghana losing it 2-0 here, I just wanted to really highlight the fact that there is promise and there is potential from this team as well.
It's better than great, Eterna. That's Egypt right now. So, with this, you're going to see them just close it out here. And that's the thing. It's 11 minutes. Like most of Egypt's games, I'm not even sure what the average game time that they had. But I will say, they were just a dominant team. Like I felt like they had everything solved and figured out that they needed to. So props to them and the coaches and then the support that Egypt has, because it clearly shows. Like just watching them draft, watching them execute the draft, watching them move around the map and rotate, in certain places and everything, right on like the timings that you're so used to seeing at like some of the highest level of competitive play. It's apparent that they're putting in the work, and that's why I'm saying, like, I know again they still have AEC. I think they will be the team to beat over there, and we'll see if by that point any of these teams that we've seen kind of duke it out here throughout the online qualifiers will be able to adjust, because again, they have plenty of time. Like there is that new patch that just came out that was dropped, and there's plenty of time for them to kind of like adjust to it and figure some new things out and then bring it to, Casablanca, Morocco. And I think that's where you'll see the improvements too of what happens from, here to eventually when we find ourselves there.
Mm-hmm. I think I need to get readjusted with everything that's going on, right? Because again, it was a
Same.
big and major patch. We even saw, like you mentioned,